Well, hello. Today we're going to be searching something very special to me, very near and dear to my heart, the Bricklin SV1. This was actually the first car that I bought for myself. I was 16. It wasn't running. I fixed it up and got it running. So I kind of have learned the history of SV1s, of Bricklin through the years because I owned one, but sadly I don't own it anymore. It's gone. I sold it. It just wasn't a practical car. Honestly, couldn't even fit in it. I'm 6'1", and my head would always hit the top. So that was kind of annoying. Just not the most practical car in the world. But boy, was that thing fun when I had it. So yes, I know some of the history, but it's been a while actually since I've diving down into the history of Bricklin again. And I know it's a fun story, so let's explore together. Bricklin SV1. So Bricklin is the company. That's the manufacturer, the make. And the model is the SV1. Bricklin only made one model, the SV1, stood for Safety Vehicle 1. So let's just start by looking at some photos. Look at this thing. There's your Bricklin right there. So obviously the gull-wing doors. Look at those things. Just like the DeLorean, that's basically how I found this car. I love Back to the Future. I wanted a DeLorean as a kid. They're pretty expensive even still to buy a used one or an older one. They're all old. Oh, no, DeLorean's coming out with new ones. But regardless, they're expensive. So I look for cars with the gull-wing doors, because that's what really is so cool about the DeLorean, in my opinion. So I found the Bricklin SV1. This is exactly like the one I had. It was this color orange, safety orange, because it was a safety vehicle. Wasn't in this good a shape. As we'll see, the fiberglass kind of cracked and it wasn't the best, but this one looks really good. But man, this brings me back sitting in that thing. Yeah, look at this, against the Corvette Stingray. Like when this thing came out in 1974, 75, it was a hot thing. So like if you were a car person back then, I'm pretty sure you would remember this. Ah, look at this, someone turned a Bricklin into like a DeLorean. Exactly, I would have loved this as a kid. I love this now. This is fun. So these were all the good ones, but unfortunately I think this is more realistic as to what most of the modern Bricklins look like today. They're just not easy to keep up and make them look nice. Oh, look at this! This is mine! This is my car! I took this photo. Well, it looks pretty good in this photo, doesn't it? I always had this black spot on the bumper right here. I was never able to get rid of that completely. But wow, it looks pretty good. You can see kind of the body panels were not flush. When you saw it in person, it didn't look quite as good as this picture made it out to. Okay, so enough gushing about the car. It's so fun and beautiful. Let's get into the history a bit about it. So it was a two-seat sports car built from 1974 to 1975. So really not that long. Under 3,000 cars were actually built, and only an estimated 1,700 Bricklins really survive as of 2012. So it's a rare car, but just not super high in value for whatever reason. So it was noteworthy for its gull-wing doors. Something about doors that go up or to the side like a Lambo just gets me excited. Ah, look at this photo. I remember propping my doors up with a 2x4 also. So these doors were heavy because this thing was a safety vehicle. So it was meant to be safe. So it had kind of a built-in roll cage. So the doors weighed almost 100 pounds if I remember right. And so being that heavy, they had to be powered. You couldn't just lift them open yourself. So they were not pneumatic originally, they were hydraulic. So it was kind of like an oil hydraulic fluid that pumped into the cylinder and made the doors go up. But they were super slow. I think it was like 7 or 8 seconds for them to open and close. And you just had to stand there in the rain or the freezing cold or whatever and wait for these things to open. But kind of a popular upgrade, which I did to my car because my doors weren't working, was changing it to an air system, so pneumatic. So you'd press the button and they would go up in like a second, 1 to 2 seconds. It was cool. So this thing was pretty innovative. Another big thing was that it was a fiberglass body, but they weren't painted. It was actually like an acrylic resin bodywork that was bonded to the fiberglass chassis, and then the color was impregnated into the plastic panel themselves, negating the need for paint. So it was literally the panels of your car were that color. It wasn't painted green, they were green, which is kind of similar to like what the Cybertruck is doing today, where it's not going to be painted. And similar to the DeLorean, because that's just plain stainless steel. You're going to see some comparisons here between the DeLorean and the Bricklin, but the Bricklin was 1975 and the DeLorean was like 1981, 2, 3, so The Bricklin did it first. So I'm just so excited, I got so much to say, but let's dive into the story. So it all starts with Mr. Malcolm Bricklin, the creator of Bricklin and all of this. So Malcolm Bricklin actually went to Japan, where he saw a Fuji Subaru 360 mini car. So there it is right there, and it actually got up to 60 miles per gallon. And it weighed under 1,000 pounds, so I guess he was planning to import these into the U.S. when he saw these, and because it weighed under 1,000 pounds, he didn't have to pass the U.S. safety, car regulations, I guess. So he sees this cool car. He's kind of getting started in like unique cars. He's interested in that stuff, and he imports these and literally forms Subaru of America. And then, so of course, Subaru of America goes public, and that's how Malcolm Bricklin kind of started and made his first big fortune. And so Malcolm Bricklin's still alive today. He's 82. And I could go into his whole story, but that's a whole separate video. It says here he's often likened, as the automotive version of P.T. Barnum. So he's got this whole crazy career, but you can see how he kind of led up to the Bricklin, but the Bricklin was kind of his big noteworthy thing in his career, but also big failure. So Malcolm's feeling like some hot shit after his whole Subaru adventure. He's, got some money to burn in his pocket, so he starts thinking, I want to start making my own car company. Like Elon Musk, something like that. And he doesn't want to do kit cars, anything like that. He wants to produce a real car, be a real car manufacturer. So in 1965, he had actually seen the publication of Ralph Nader's book, Unsafe at Any Speed. So that's kind of how the ball got rolling in his head of that he needed to make like a safe car. Safety was important to the American public at this time. And he didn't want to do kind of like a standard family type car because that was already being done by the major manufacturers in America. So he went off to do a sports car because that's what you do. Also, it's kind of the sexiest option too. And so smart guy that Malcolm was, he knew his unique selling proposition was safety. So he had the sports car, sexy sports car, fast, but also very safe, which is a great idea, I think, really important. And the bones of a good idea are there. And so Malcolm gets to work on the design. What is this car going to look like? And so he first starts working off with Bruce Myers of Myers Mannix, like the little doom buggies that you put on the old Volkswagens. That's so cool. And so here is the first Bricklin prototype, actually remarkably similar to what actually came out. And what's interesting is they kind of made the whole body, but then it used kind of a whole range of off-the-shelf parts that already existed from Datsun, Toyota, GM, had a tilting steering wheel assembly from Chrysler. So it just kind of used all these existing parts and put them into kind of a new package, which is similar to what Elon Musk did, I guess, with the Lotus and the first Tesla Roadster. So they have their concept car ready, but now they need to kind of make it production ready. Is it going to be practical to produce? So Malcolm Bricklin goes to Herb Grass Design. So here is Mr. Herb Grass in some lovely horn-rimmed glasses, must say. And Herb was really quite an extraordinary car designer. He worked and helped with the Dodge Challenger, which I love. I had one of those too, the newer ones, but he did the Ford Falcon, and he also helped work kind of modifying and making the original Batmobile. But Herb is really the one who took this prototype and kind of breathed life into it and made it something exciting and really practical. So they ended up making about 8 prototypes, and it's cool. You can see on this site, they actually have some of the prototypes are still in existence, which is really, really cool. They kind of went through a whole shuffling of different parts, off-the-shelf types of things, trying all these kinds of things. So don't need to dive into all that, but they were just experimenting and trying stuff. And then a couple of the prototype cars were also used for test crashing. And so now Malcolm had to figure out where he was going to produce these things. So he's doing all his research. Eventually he ends up in Canada, in New Brunswick, and they kind of embraced the idea there because it was a project to help provide employment for local workers. And so with that in mind, this was a big deal for the local government. They liked bringing in new business, so they would provide an initial subsidy to Malcolm Bricklin for $4.5 million to get the first run of cars into production. And they also provided an empty factory building and promised to subsidize the workers' wages. So a pretty sweet deal. Also very similar to the DeLorean and their deal with Northern Ireland, I think. And so here's a great example of them using like off-the-shelf parts. This is a Di Tommaso Pantera. This is their taillight right here. And then look at this. This is the Bricklin taillight. It's exactly the same taillight. Okay, and then just to go over some of the features again, remember, this was a safety vehicle. That's the name of it. So safety was super important. So this is literally the steel roll cage that was built into the body of the Bricklin. Kind of similar to the Cybertruck today. That's so cool. And then look, you can see up here, see these little shocks? These were 5-mile-per-hour bumpers. So the bumper would attach to those shocks, and you could literally hit into it and it would shock back and go back. That's pretty smart to me, so you wouldn't get a dented bumper either. And so apparently even the decision to use gull-wing doors was a safety feature, because the gull-wing doors wouldn't open up into traffic, so you wouldn't get slammed into them like a suicide door or something, I guess. And it also allowed, because the door didn't go down to the bottom, so it allowed the tube frame to come up higher, so they had more of a roll cage chassis type of thing. But yeah, if there was a malfunction and you had to lift those up, those doors weighed like 90, 100 pounds. So if you're in a crash and your doors ain't opening, good luck getting out of that thing. Apparently, like a quirk of the gull-wing doors and the hydraulic pump was that if you attempted to raise one door and lower one door at the same time, it would cause the pump to fail. So they're getting into production, they're trying to do stuff, and so the idea of having the actual fiberglass with the acrylic with the color into it was pretty new. They had been doing it on like bathtubs and that kind of stuff, but never on a car. So they really had a ton of problems trying to get this stuff correct and get it to work. They had problems with it cracking during the manufacturing process, and also that UV light would go through that top layer and it would discolor the color underneath that was the acrylic. So your car would start to get sun faded pretty quickly, which still even happened to the production cars. That happened to mine for sure. It was not the original safety orange color. And unless you repaint these things, there's nothing you can do. So I guess the real issue was the bonding of the acrylic to the fiberglass. As much as 60% of them in the first production run would just they would just come apart. And so Albert Bricklin, Malcolm's father, proposed that you strike each part that came out with a 7-pound hammer a couple times, and if it did not delaminate, then it passed. This is remarkably similar to the Cybertruck. So they kind of figured it out, they got okay, but even still, during manufacturing, when they were full in manufacturing process, they lost 15 to 25% of their body panels because they delaminated. So they do actually begin production, and in 1974 they actually got out 774 cars. And so the initial engine that Bricklin used was an AMC 360, which was a V8. And it said that Malcolm was forced to kind of choose an AMC engine because he could have never gotten a General Motors engine because they wouldn't have supplied it to him, because this Bricklin was a direct competition to the Corvette. So it had a 4-barrel carburetor, and when they kind of started all this in 1971, it had produced about 290 horsepower, but this was the 70s and emissions regulations were coming on, and so by the time it was ready to produce these things, it was down to like 220 horsepower. So really not much for a really heavy car. Look, here's an ad for one of the first Bricklins coming out. Oh, it is such a cool car. It really does look a lot like a Corvette too. You can see the styling kind of influences. And then so in 1975, Bricklin changed from the AMC V8 to a Ford 351 Windsor, which is what I had in mind. I had the 351. But that brought it down to even 175 horsepower, and it was only a 2-barrel carburetor. Here's this ad advertising the sheer brilliance of this body. And it was a really cool idea if they could have worked it out, where even if you got a scratch, you could just kind of buff it out. I think they oversold how cool these were, though. They were not getting them there. And look, I should show you too. These are all the colors. So you had safety white, safety green, safety suntan, which is basically like brownish, but suntan sounds better. And then you had safety red and safety orange. So every color was safety. So they were planning for this car to sell for $4,000, but by the time it actually got to market, it cost $7,490. So almost double what they were planning. And for comparison, in 1974, a base model Corvette sold for $6,082. So this thing's more than a Corvette, so it's pretty pricey. And it just went up and up too. In 1975, the Bricklin price was up to almost $10,000. Wow, but Malcolm was actually able to establish more than 400 United States dealerships and had thousands of cars on order at the time that the company was forced into receivership. Spoiler alert, things went bad. So kind of the reason it died was just why it's so hard to build a car, you know, and a lot of problems that happen with other automotive startups, and Bricklin happened with Bricklin II, are just poor quality workmanship, overpriced, and labor relation problems. And they used existing parts, so those parts weren't really an issue. It was the factory hands that were tasked with the job of assembling all these cars. That's kind of where the issue was. The quality of assembly was really substandard. Unemployment in the area where these were being built in Canada was around 25%, so really high. So it's kind of assumed that Malcolm Bricklin got a lot of unskilled and underskilled labor. And then there was also a problem that when hunting season came around, a large portion of the workforce left and went hunting, leaving the factory badly understaffed. So in Canada, I guess you just leave to go hunting when it's hunting season. Forget your job. Yeah, and the issues with the body panels, they're having to throw out a lot of those, was really expensive to them too. That was also a big reason for their downfall. So it wasn't dead because of a bad design. It was really just the business decisions, the labor, quality control, and technical problems and stuff that really doomed Bricklin. And they were fairly popular. I mean, even when they went into receivership in 1975, they still had a backlog of orders, so people wanted the car. I haven't even shown you the inside, so let me show you the interior because it is delightfully 70s. Look at everything is just brown. I remember in there I replaced my brown carpet, pulling that stuff out and then just putting in new brown carpet that wasn't quite as dingy, but just still not great. Not my favorite. This was probably really in vogue in the 70s, but not that great now. The brown leather looks good. So another little quirk about the Bricklin, there was no cigarette lighter included. And the reasoning, literally this was written in the brochure, said, because we don't think smoking while driving is safe and we don't want you dropping a hot cigarette in your lap and driving our beautiful car into a tree. So you don't get a cigarette lighter because it's not safe. And this is the safety vehicle. And check this out. The Scottsdale, Arizona Police Department actually leased a couple of Bricklins for their police force. And look at these things painted, and they got the siren on top. It said that Malcolm leased them to the police department for just $1. These are really cool. So unpractical, but man, that's fun. And look at this, a special edition called the Bricklin Chairman, where it was black and had this gold striping here. So it was kind of an effort just to raise more capital. So it was this special edition Bricklin that cost more, had a larger engine, and then when you bought one, you were flown to the assembly plant to watch your car being built, and you would also receive a gold jumpsuit along with the car on delivery. How freaking 70s is that? But man, that's a fun bit of history. Look, there was really a love for this car. This is a mini Bricklin that was offered. So just a few years after Bricklin went out of business, this mini car builder offered these little mini Bricklins to existing SV-1 owners. Basically like a little go-kart, had 3 horsepower engine, and you could get it in all the colors you wanted. So here's somebody restoring one of them. Yeah, look, there's the chassis, just a little go-kart. You have to put an engine on it. So apparently prices on these used Bricklins are starting to go back up a little bit. It's kind of having a renaissance, so maybe you should invest in a Bricklin. Maybe I should have kept mine. And Mr. Malcolm Bricklin is still at it. He's got a new venture, a $26,000 battery-powered electric 3-wheeler with scissor doors. Of course, this guy loves the cool doors, like me, called the Bricklin 3 EV. So unfortunately, the company went under, but man, what a ride. How cool for Malcolm Bricklin to at least get to do that and have that on his resume and have that bit of history. And I got to experience it, man. It was really fun. And Malcolm claims that they were just about getting all the kinks worked out by the time they had to close everything and you know, ran out of money basically. Yeah, the similarities between the Bricklin and the DeLorean are pretty striking. I mean, obviously it's just first those doors, they're both 2-seaters, and then just the story about them of how they each have their own inventor and go to a different country because they're subsidized for production and then they collapse. It's remarkable. Makes you wonder, like, what if Back to the Future used the Bricklin instead of a DeLorean? Maybe if they did that, the Bricklin would be massive right now. Those few remaining cars, those like 1,700, would be worth so much. Yes, look at this Car and Driver article from 1975 doing a direct comparison of the Corvette and the Bricklin. They look similar sized, similar shapes too. The Bricklin looks a bit more DeLorean-y, doesn't it? Like a little more boxed off, whereas the Corvette looks kind of more rounded, like sexy type of fenders and stuff. It looks like essentially Car and Driver says the Corvette's better, but the Bricklin's kind of cooler because it's a new design and kind of innovative, but they're like, it still feels prototypey. It doesn't feel quality like the Corvette did, you know. So we'll finish with the video of my Bricklin that I put on YouTube 9 years ago. So there's my car from the photo before. That's me, 9 years younger. God, it looks sunburned and wearing a weird tank top. But look at that door pop right up with the air system that we had installed. And yeah, man, these things were fun. It was a really fun car to have. The big V8 wasn't very fast really at all. Especially compared to modern cars, but even like, I feel like my Jeep Patriot's kind of the same speed as this thing was, but man, oh man, it sounded so good. I got a good exhaust on that thing, and it had that old car kind of burnt gasoline smell, which I know is horrible for the environment, but man, it was fun. It really smelled good. So yeah, look at this thing. We got the headlights popped up. It has something special to it. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for kind of going down the history of Bricklin with me and letting me share my Bricklin history as well. So here's the door again real quick. And the lights go down one at a time. Yeah, they never went down together. Look at that thing just staying there. All right, so long. Thank you. Hey, thanks for watching this video. This is my dog, Murphy. And these are dog treats. Now I'll give Murphy one of these dog treats. And all you have to do is press the like button. Just press that little like button right down there at the bottom of this video. And this sweet, adorable, cute little puppy gets a treat. All thanks to you. Alright, you did it? Okay, I believe you. You said you did it. There you go, Murph. She got that treat because of you. Now, I'll eat one of these treats. And all you have to do is click that subscribe button. Right there, pointing to it. Just click that subscribe button. Subscribe to Curiosityness with me, Travis DeRose. Get lots of good video. And I'll eat this treat. Alright, you did that too? That's not very good. Bro, not very good.